So how many of you spent time yesterday writing a long list of things you're planning on doing in 2012? All right, list makers, raise your hands. Thank you. No other list makers? Come on now. Back in the day, I used to write some grueling lists of things that I was going to do. I mean, you talk about thou shalts. Clearly, absolutely unobtainable resolutions with no plan. Usually 10 of them, because I'm a list maker, and it was my annual every year at New Year's Eve, my beat myself up for what I hadn't done the year before on the previous list before I made a new list ritual. You know that? Can you see that idea even if you don't make it? Now my list is a little different. As it's now become this kind of yearly plan. I look back at some journals that I've written and kind of see how far I've come. I love to pick up an old journal from 3 or 5 years ago and go, look at all these things I was worried about that didn't matter one iota. It's my favorite part of New Year's Day. But now I make plans, and I actually there's this website called futureme.org, and I really recommend it to you in order to help keep yourself on track, because there's nothing like your own voice from the past to drive the train. So occasionally I get these emails from myself. Well, you've had your baby now. She's 18 months old. Are you sleeping? Cute little notes that kind of keep me on task. Remember your goals for X was this and that, just little notes. You can use it to send notes to your family in the future. It's a lovely thing to do, to send notes to your significant other or your kids. Anyway, futureme.org. Use it, because as we plow along in the sermon today, I think that it's one way to be able to help you keep yourself on track with the things that you commit to. So on New Year's Day, I also spend some time, though now, because I'm planning a lot better, scheduling in my calendar checkpoints throughout the year and kind of plotting the specifics of what it is that I would like to do. So if I have some big goal, I then break it down into segments and spend some time figuring out what I need to do each week in order to be on task. And that's important, right? It's important, especially if you're planning some long-distance athletic endeavor. Many of you might know that I completed my first triathlon in 10 years in September. Thank you. Thank you. People have been saying, how did you lose your baby weight? What diet are you on? And I said, triathlon training, and I don't recommend it to anyone. Not the easy way to go. But that first triathlon was part of a longer range goal that I have to do a half Ironman at 40. So I'm going to do an Olympic distance triathlon in April. And then my birthday is in August. There's nothing like a birthday with a 0 on it to make you reevaluate, reassess, re-challenge. But my birthday's in August, and then the half Ironman is in September. So I have planned all my workouts, and I've looked at all the distances. You have to build distances. The goal for me, of course, is to finish. I'm not in any kind of competition except with myself. The goal is to finish, and to finish uninjured. Those are the two things that I have on my schedule, right? But what I'm absolutely clear about that I want to share with you is that my success is not my own. It is definitely not my own. I got into riding bicycles because I was doing MS 150s. For those of you who don't know, I lost my dad this year, and one of the things that he had was MS, struggled with it since he was 34 or 35. And I got into training, riding bikes long distance when my dad got sick, to raise money, to try and fundraise for the MS Society. And they do what they call the MS 150, so you do 150 miles in 2 days. And that was the long process there. And that got me kind of interested in distance cycling, and then that got me connected to triathlon training. But someone once asked me, why do you do these things? Why are you doing this to yourself? And my answer is because I can. Because when you've had someone in your life who can't, and you can, then you should. And if you don't have anybody in your life that can't, then let me introduce you to some people. Okay? Because honestly, to have the capacity to be able to do something and not do it, for me, is the biggest sin. It is the biggest sin that I can imagine. So I have kind of created, though, along with my dad's inspiration of kind of knowing that he can't and so I should, I have created this kind of imaginary Team Tamra. Think of it with me. They might have their own fight song in a second. No, see, I grew up at Northeast High School. I need Gabriel back on the drums. We're going to do a little Booker T. Right. But anyway, Team Tamra, I have a coach that I talk to regularly to look at my plan to make sure that I'm not going to hurt myself, right? Somebody who helps me shape my goals and who asks about my progress. But I also have what I think is really important is a group of swimmers. So once a week I swim, not just by myself, but with a group of people to try and push me in my swimming. I have a running group that I run with once a week, even though I do runs by myself during the week. But it's important to be able to do what I do, both solo and in community. Do you see how this applies to you, even if you're not going to train in triathlon? Yes. Right. Connect dots. Yes. And of course, support from my family on Team Tamra, right? Because I couldn't do any of this if somebody wasn't taking care of Beckett, right? And if I didn't have a job, that's important too, right? So I've got this full team. What I feel like, no one is in complete isolation. We all have these teams of support behind us. But I want you to think about, what would you do if nothing was in your way? And if you had a full team of people to work for and with you? My theme that I'm going to keep coming back to today is dream big. Make a commitment, get connected, and take action. Dream big, make a commitment, get connected, and take action. So I also see this kind of planning that I do around the New Year's and even looking at my triathlon training as a way not just to change me, but this is a model that can be applied on how to change the world. If you have long-term goals that are shaping your everyday actions, that is how the world gets changed. And you can't do it solo. You have to also do it in community. So January's theme is justice. And this is the first part of a sermon series that we're calling the Five-Fold Path to a Justice-Driven Life. We are proposing that a justice-driven life requires some attention to 5 different areas of your life. They are listed on the front of your order of service. Commitment, spiritual practice, a willingness to honor diversity and celebrate difference, a willingness to put your money and your resources towards your goals, and finally, a commitment to be able to do something new creatively to get you thinking outside the box. It's like a creative response to injustice, to exercise your minds to think outside the box. So we're going to spend a Sunday on each one of these topics, focusing on a path, a Sunday, and then ask you to commit in a specific way to support that area in 2012. So today, before we leave, I'm going to ask that you fill out what you're going to commit to in number 1, which is going to ask about volunteers, right? Now, some of you will say, I don't know, but wait, I don't know. I don't know what opportunities there are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some ways you can find out in a minute. But I also want you to know, or maybe you're thinking ahead and going, ooh, I'm going to miss that money sermon, rats. You can also, I knew you were thinking that, weren't you? You can fill those out in advance and put them in. We're letting you do any or all today. Do you see what I'm saying? Each Sunday, so that if you're going to be gone, you can fill them out in advance. But we'll go over it in just a second. So my goal this morning, though, is to focus on the relationship between justice and commitment. So let me just begin by making sure that we're all on the same page about our call to do justice in this world as a religious people. Because we're a diverse group, have a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different beliefs, a lot of different ideas. But I think that we can agree on the fact that there is a broader claim on our life. There is a broader claim on our life than just living day to day for ourselves. And Marlon and I have spoken actually publicly about this claim in the past month. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a fantastic article in Urban Tulsa where Marlon was quoted as saying, "The people who attend my congregation are seriously looking for ways to connect their values with the way that they live every day. They are seeking to redefine the idea of the good life in ways that are morally, environmentally, and economically responsible." And then there was this beautiful spread in the Tulsa People magazine bragging about our partners in education and our reading program at the Laura Duster Shelter. I don't know if you saw that. And I said in that, at All Souls, we believe it is our responsibility to work today to help create the world as it should be. We all agree that service is how we live out our values in this world. So for a group of people who think differently, believe differently, Marlon and I go out there and say all kinds about the things that you want to do. So I just want to make sure, don't we? I mean, we do. We talk about y'all believing and wanting things all the time. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So we are called, I believe, as a religious people to be bound not only to this church community, but we are also called as a religious people to help those in need, to care for those outside of our community as well as our own, to offer time and our talent and our treasure to live out our values in the world. Am I right? All right, good. See, we're on the same page. See, I have come this morning with a bit of an assumption that I need to check out. I have come to church this morning with an assumption that you believe that injustice is prevalent in this world. That life for most people is not fair. Do you believe that? Okay. Because even though there is considerable beauty and love and friendship and compassion and grace, I'm not arguing that, there is also injustice. Am I right? All right, church, come on now. So when there is injustice in the world, there is an accompanying moral outrage in the hearts of those who are willing to look at it. Let me say that sentence again. When there is injustice in the world, there is an accompanying moral outrage in the hearts of those who are willing to recognize it, who are willing to look at it. And if you do not have some sense of moral outrage, maybe you see the injustice, but you don't have that anger in you, that driving desire to do something about it, then my assumption is that your moral outrage has been tempered over time by being overwhelmed of all of the injustice that is begging for your attention. Am I right? Yes? All right, you got to talk to me now. That's what they say you do. Come on. If you do not have a deep-seated ache to have an impact on this earth while you are here, a way to use what you have to make a difference in this world, then my assumption is that you might just be stuck because you're unsure where to begin. Does that also sound right? That's possible? All right. So in these pews today, in the pew, there are those of you who feel that you are spending your lives in service to something greater, who have figured this out, who know how to volunteer. You found a way to take that moral outrage to serve and organize and volunteer and run for office and show up at meetings and greet people and read to kids and inspire others through your life's action, right? There are those of you who already do that. I know that because we talk about it all the time and we see it. Our presence in the schools and our presence in the Laura Dester shelter and at the homeless shelter and being able to feed people. I mean, we do all kinds of amazing work in this church. So I know that those people are also out there, but also in these pews, alongside those who figured it out, based on me, I'm working through some reasoning here of my assumptions, right? So based on my assumptions, if you have not found a way to serve, then you might be angry or overwhelmed or unsure. Does that make sense? Yeah. So sitting alongside in these pews are some angry, overwhelmed, and unsure people. So we might need to be scared or nervous. But I'm not really nervous at all. I want you to know that I am excited. I am really excited. Because what we have already done is so amazing, but what excites me the most is that the untapped potential within the walls of this room. The untapped potential to make a significant impact on this community, on Tulsa, and as an example to the world. But it takes people knowing what they want to change and perpetually, continuously showing up. Your bodies at the meetings, your brains engaged, your mouths opening to do something about it. We need people who dream big, who commit, who connect, and who take action. And if you do not see the injustice of the world at all, and you thought, what do you mean life's not fair when I said that? Then you and I need to have a more in-depth conversation, probably one-on-one, and I'm going to start including you in my daily prayers, because the world is full of injustice. And so as a religious person, as religious people, we are outraged, we are incensed, we are downright ticked off at the state of the world, and the question is why? Why? Because what we are outraged about demonstrates to the world what we value. What we are outraged about demonstrates to the world what we value. What we are outraged about shows the world that we are invested, okay? But outrage isn't enough. See, some people stop right there, right? They just stop at being angry and they don't do anything about it. We need commitment. And commitment implies action. Marlon's going to talk next week about spiritual practice and what it means to transform that anger into something new. So if you are still stuck in that place, next week might be a good place for you to come to unravel that anger. But we need to show the world that we are taking responsibility, that we will not sit idly by while someone else defines what is important to us. We need to show the world that as religious people, we will not continue to make choices that disregard our values, that we are invested in seeing that the wrongs of the world are righted. We are invested in creating the world as it should be. So are you curious about what I'm outraged about? I'll spend a minute on it. People love to talk to me about anger. I think I have a neon blinking sign that says, "Talk to me about how angry you are." Because they know I can hold it, because they know I'm angry too. I am outraged that there are children in this world and in this city who go to bed hungry when there is enough food in the world to feed everyone. I am angry that we are still at war. I am angry that our veterans do not receive the respect that they deserve and the care that they need. I am angry that our planet's limited resources are being squandered by a system that I participate in. Yuck. I am outraged and angry about the homophobia that persists, especially among religious people. That my primary relationship is condemned by them, and that Oklahoma will not let my partner and I domestically adopt or foster a child together. I am angry that we imprison the mentally ill and the addicted. I am angry at some isms, and I'm going to list them. I am angry at absolutism and classism and dualism. I am angry at egotism and fatalism and hedonism. Apathy, not an ism. Imperialism and materialism. Over-intellectualism, nihilism, and pessimism. Racism, reductionism, sexism, and triumphalism. And I'm going to do my best each and every day to spend my life in service of a world where all of those isms are cast into the fire of somebody. I was getting carried away now. Where all those isms are no more. A world where each person has inherent worth granted to them by God simply because they were born, and receives the resources during their life to be able to live out the claim that's on their lives. And so I dream big, and I commit, and I connect, and I take action. And I ask you to dream big with me, to commit, to connect, and to take action. Because as religious people, God calls us to be morally outraged together, so that this world knows what we care about and what our vision of the kingdom on earth will and will not include. So I'm making an assumption that it is not whether you are going to make a difference in this world that might be holding you back, that might have you stuck. It's just how. Is that true? Okay. So my suggestion to you, if you don't know how, is to just commit to something that is connected to your values. that does not oppose your values. Commit to something in the meantime until you find the perfect thing. Just commit. Now, the interesting thing about the call in our church is that I'm not here to command you about what you need to do, to tell you how or when, or I'll tell you why, but how or what or when. But I will walk with you, help you seek, ask you tough questions, but ultimately, your call to do justice work is between you and God. Your call to do justice work as you walk humbly with Him in the way that you are called to do, that call to do justice is between you and your own heartbreak. So our job is to continually remind you of the possibilities of a future where your dreams come true and where your values are lived out. So let me tell you a story. It's a story about a Belgian mountain climber who was famous for his attempts to climb the biggest snowy mountain in the Alps. Now, he was famous for his attempts at failing to climb the mountain in the Alps. He tried it at least 30 times, but each time he had come short of the peak and returned to base camp. Persistent man. He would begin the ascent at a good pace, focusing on the snowy summit up above, imagining the marvelous view and the sense of freedom that must come from being there. But as he went on and his strength began to dwindle, his gaze would start to slowly move from here, lower and lower, and more often his attention would be drawn not to where he was going, but to his worn-out boots. Finally, when the clouds had gathered around him near the peak, and he understood that he, or thought at least, that he wouldn't be able to enjoy the view from the summit that day, he would just sit down to rest, and then think he'll try again another day, begin his descent back down to the village, slightly worried about what all the people would say when he got down for the 31st time of not quite reaching the summit. On one of these occasions, he went up the mountain. He was accompanied by the town optician, who was able to join him on the trip and see the climber's pattern of this failed attempt firsthand. The optician was the most encouraging to the climber of all of the townspeople, and he presented the climber at the end of this trip with a pair of special glasses. He said, "If it starts clouding over, I want you to put these glasses on. Or even, actually, if you feel like your feet are hurting, I want you to put these glasses on too. They're special glasses, they'll help you." And so the climber took the gift without really giving it much thought. And on his next climb, when his feet started hurting again, really grabbing his attention, he remembered the optician and what he'd said, and he put on those glasses. And the pain in his feet was pretty bad. He'd climbed this mountain 32 times now, so those new sunglasses, he could still manage somehow to see that snow-covered summit at the top. And so he kept going. And just as nearly as it always seemed to happen, the clouds started to roll in the form of cloud cover just before the peak. But with his glasses on, he could still see the summit just through the clouds. And so the climber kept climbing, leaving those clouds behind, forgetting his pain, and finally arriving at the summit. And it was certainly worth it. His feeling of triumph was incomparable, almost as magnificent as the wonderful view, resplendent in its silence. The mountain view below was surrounded by a very dense sea of clouds, and the climber didn't remember those clouds being so thick, so he looked more closely at the glasses, and he realized that the optician had engraved a light image on the lenses in the form of the snow-covered summit. It was made in such a way, you can laugh again, it's all right, it's funny, right? It was made in such a way that you could only see it if you were looking up. The optician had understood that whenever the climber lost sight of the mountaintop in those clouds, and aren't there always clouds right before you get to the peak? He would similarly lose sight of his dream, and his will to continue would wane. So we need to regularly be reminded of our vision of the world as it could be. and then keep putting one foot in front of the other. And it certainly helps to have someone come along with you. Now, on the one hand, the job that Marlon and I have to do is fairly easy because your participation is mostly up to you. We can't command you to do anything. And on the other hand, our job is incredibly difficult because we can only help point the way. We have this vision of what could be. We could show you why we believe there is a call or a claim on our lives, demonstrate that call on our own lives, and then ask that you take responsibility and commit. Because our church, see, is founded on religious freedom. It's why I can stand up in the pulpit today and speak from my heart. But it is not just my freedom, it's also yours. And so this morning is not about justice and commandment. It's about justice and commitment. You see, there may have been a time in your life when you needed commandments. Can you imagine a time like that? When I was a kid, I needed commandments. I listened to the beautiful cello this morning, and I wish that my mother had commanded me to stick with the cello. There is a time in our life when we are being shaped and formed, when we need some rules to understand. But see, we do not any longer have a morality that is derived from the letter of the law. We inherited this richer understanding of the commandments that were handed down to us, an understanding of the spirit of the law, that message that Jesus brought that said, no, we must look at the people who are also in front of us. We must look at what the call on our lives is in the moment and not just the letter of the law at any given time. And we are free as a church to covenant with whom we choose and to set our own goals. Now that's great, and it's difficult. We've been asked by our senior minister to let compassion and courage and connection be our guides and to step up and take responsibility. And so I ask you, what will you do with your moral outrage? What will you do as a response to injustice? One small thing. My prayer is that you will commit, that you will freely commit to do something with the fuel of that anger that is in your soul. And may I suggest that if you are stuck about the one right thing, that you commit to just do something in the meantime. Try something for a year. I have a friend whose husband is a researcher and a perfectionist. And so when they moved into their new house, they needed to buy a couch to be able to fill this new living room. And 3 years later, they didn't have a couch. He'd been researching it in depth, comparing and contrasting colors and prints and prices and I bet cushion, right? But 3 years later, they have no couch. And so she said, can we just buy a couch in the meantime? In the meantime, while you find the perfect couch, can we just have a good enough couch in the meantime? I would like you to have a good enough practice, a practice that does not violate your values, a practice that helps to move, that is in line with your values, something that you can commit to volunteer to see how it goes for a while. Does that make sense? Because see, commitment is at its healthiest when it is made in spite of doubt. In spite of doubt. If you're waiting for a doubtless choice, it may never come. Just like that couch. So our sermon series this month looks at how you can commit to walk 5 simultaneous paths to a justice-driven life. If you will look at the front of your order of service with me, by committing to volunteering your time, that's what we're asking you for today, is to commit to volunteer your time, to do something at All Souls, to do something in the community. I'm going to walk you through all of them, but then I'm going to come back to the first one about some ways you can find some more information about that. Just in case you're missing the money sermon or the spirituality sermon or the celebrating, right? If you happen to miss a Sunday, I want to make sure you can fill it out if you want. So by committing to volunteering your time to do justice, by committing to a spiritual practice outside of Sunday morning to re-energize your justice work, by committing to spend your money wisely and share your resources with those organizations who profess your values, by committing to grow and change, by intentionally seeking out diversity, by committing to expand your capacity to respond to injustice, by deepening your creativity. So every Sunday, we're going to give you an opportunity to reflect on one of these topics and to commit to something for a year. If you want to fill them out each week, you can. If you want to hold on to one and turn it in at the end of the month, you can do that too. If you fill out everything today and then next week hear a really great sermon from Marlon and think you want to change what you're doing, that's okay too, because the order of service, no, you're also going to put a date on it, right? You're going to put a name and a date on it, and we'll know that the newest one is the right one, right? If you're unsure about how to get connected in the community, there's a community volunteer fair in Emerson Hall next Sunday, January 8th. This fair showcases nonprofit organizations in Tulsa that are associated with members of our church, either who serve as an employee or on the board. So they're going to have booths. They'll be telling of their services and of their volunteer opportunities that they offer. And then on January 22nd in Emerson Hall, we're going to have this All Souls Outreach Program presentation on what they're doing and how we can each become involved or receive assistance as the case may be. And then lastly, if you have not joined the church recently and you have not filled out one of these, this is a membership gifts and interest survey that I give out at our All Souls 303 when you join the church. If you have not filled out one of these, you can pick one up in the office on your way out and fill it out and return it back to the office next week. But what this will do, if you don't know where to start in getting involved in the church, this asks a whole bunch of questions that will help me be able to help point you in the right direction. Does that make sense? So if you fill one of these out and bring it back, I'll talk to you about what you filled out. So, dream big, commit, get connected, take action. We're asking you to take responsibility and to commit in a public way. So we've devised a follow-up process for these that concern the church, so we'll be organizing those in February and then following up with you. We aren't following up with your action in the community, that's yours. Maybe you should go to futureme.org and send yourself an email. Although let me suggest that because of the freedom that you have in this church, that you also take some initiative to get going on your commitment as soon as you turn it in. Because you know that fuel is burning the brightest right at the beginning. You know that whole January, everybody's going to church, everybody's trying to get skinny. The clubs right now or workout places are packed. So use the fuel, use that time to get motivated right now and take the initiative on getting your commitment started. Our follow-up is kind of like a safety net for you. But for our lives to change, we must change. For our lives to change, we must change. For the world to change, we must commit to do something about it. So I ask you to take some time during the sermon response. David's going to play for a little bit. Let us think and reflect on what we might be charged to do. Write it down. Borrow a pen. Kathy's got pens in her hand. If you need a pen, you can raise your hand. She'll be walking through the aisle. And place it in the vase in the foyer on your way out. And if you need support in figuring out what to do, take the time this month to explore your possibilities, but do not forget to turn them in so that we can help you make your commitments come true. So dream big, commit, connect, take action. Amen.